Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this accountability and performance meeting. For the benefit of we public watching, you're very welcome. I'm Jonathan Ash-Edwards, Police and Crime Commissioner for Hertfordshire, and I'll let colleagues just introduce themselves.
Good morning, I'm Charlie Hall, I'm the Chief Constable.
Good morning, I'm Bill Chatham, Charlie's Deputy Chief Constable.
Thank you very much. So the purpose of these meetings is to help me fulfil my statutory duty to hold the Chief Constable to account for the Constabulary's work and performance. The meetings are intended to be in nature, so they don't cover any individual cases. The meeting is available to the public to watch, but it's in view-only mode, so there's no opportunity for any public questions. But the public are very welcome, and hopefully find these meetings useful in terms of the conversations we're having and the transparency of the process. Today's agenda is focused on the Peel Inspection Report of the Hertfordshire Constabulary that was published by His Majesty's Inspectorate of Constabulary Fire and Rescue Services last month. So we're going to do a special meeting on that, going through all the various sections of the report. The police force is inspected every few years, and then the report is done around a number of different themes, which are graded and give some commentary and recommendations as appropriate from the inspector. So we'll go through each of those themes individually. The inspection report is published on the HMIC FRS website to look at it while we're having the conversation. Start off really by asking the Chief Constable for reflections on the report, on the inspection. There's been a difficult process in terms of the demands on the constabulary going through it. Obviously, with recommendations coming out of the report. So, Chief Constable, start.
Yeah, certainly, Commissioner. As I say, the report's published last month. It's been a long process for us, the inspection, an intensive period throughout the first half of this year. In particular, a lot of data analysis from predominantly the autumn of last year, period where they had a look at the data. The final report is not as good as I might have hoped it would be in terms of some of the gradings. I think it's been particularly challenging and tough. In some areas, I think it's a quite stringent report for us, and maybe doesn't reflect some of the good work that I think's always going on within the constabulary, but we accept the report for what it is. I mean, interestingly, if you look across the country, the Peel process, and this round in particular, is proving particularly demanding for the vast majority of forces. And if viewers were to go on to the HMIC website, they'll be able to see the gradings and reports for other forces as well. And in many areas, our report is not significantly out of kilter with that is being reported against for other forces. Certainly identify some areas where we need to make some further improvements, including we'll go through that today. I think from me, the right standards that we are measured against and asked to achieve, they are challenging and demanding. And I think probably what it underlines is the complexity within policing, the range of those areas that we are rightly expected to deliver against. When we measure that against the resourcing and funding available to the constabulary, means there are some real challenges as to how we can achieve in all of these areas. There's definitely areas we can make improvements, and we'll talk about some of those today. But I think the equation of the complexity and the demand on policing, the reports also say something about the amount of resource and funding that we have in order to make some of these achievements.
Thank you for that context, and you can certainly see that in that kind of wider view of inspection reports across the country. And I think it's also fair to say that the field work for this inspection process didn't start that long after the conclusion of previous inspection rounds. So actually the kind of gap between reports isn't huge in terms of addressing recommendations.
Yes, that's right. It's a period of about 9-10 months, I think, from the field work commenced. So the ability to build on the previous report, some forces will have a longer period than we've had, but that's, yeah, it is what it is. And I think the important thing is, for us, we need to, and we have accepted the report, and we're already working through, and we already think we're in a quite different place in many of these areas, and we'll be able to evidence that through the course of the meeting. So it's, the report as published, I think, reflects where we are at currently as the Constabulary, given that we've already made progress in many areas.
Okay, thank you for that. Let's go on to the first graded section of the report, then, which is around recording crime, and referred to in the crime, danger, integrity. So that was graded inadequate by the Inspectorate. Perhaps I could start by asking what conclusions the Constabulary has reached about the reasons for the under-recording of crime, the learning from that, and what work's being done to respond to those recommendations and progress made so far.
So the CDI element, crime data integrity, was really disappointing for us as an organisation. It's key for members of the public to know that if they contact us, the crime will be recorded and dealt with properly. The reasons on reflection are many and varied. If we're honest, we've been doing an awful lot of work within our communications centre over the course of the last year to look at processes to make sure we answer the phone, risk assess appropriately, respond to the public, and some of the processes around crime reporting sit within the same department. And I think reflections, those crime recording processes have not been as robust as they ought to be. There's a training element for it. The rules are actually quite complex. We've got a new workforce, so we need to make sure that they've got the training in order to comply with those rules. We did identify some of this, Commissioner, prior to the inspection and put in additional governance back in September last year prior to the inspection. That's focused on certain elements, but not all that was found by the Inspectorate. But we were on it and making improvements. In terms of what's been done, we've put additional resources into the control room to tighten up those processes very quickly. And the training, the whole workforce should be trained by about the end of December, because we're responding quickly to this. And new recruit training, we've put it back into new recruit training. So right from day one, we stress the importance of this element. We can see through our own data that improvements have been made. We've strengthened our audit around this and our QA processes, so we can see through our own data that those improvements are being made and are being made at pace. And I'd like to just reiterate to the public who may be watching, if you're a victim of crime, please contact us. You will be taken seriously and we will report and investigate these crimes. We've got an independent force coming in to review our work in December, and so our force of experience was outstanding in this area. So that gives us a better sense of the improvements that we think we've made. And then HMI, at our request, I think we've done anyway, they'll be coming back in to chart the progress early in the new year, and we welcome that.
Thank you. That's helpful. So at the point the Inspectorate did the kind of data analysis and this bit of sampling that they use, I think I'm right saying, but they kind of extrapolate out. They were estimating 82.6% of crime, reported crime being recorded. Can you just unpick for me and perhaps provide some public reassurance what that looks like in terms of what ones that's being or hadn't been reported? Because it would be, I think, easy from the way the report is worded to kind of assume that 1 in 5 call handlers don't report the crime that's reported. My understanding is not the case. So can you just provide a bit of clarity and assurance as to what it is? And like my understanding, it's around secondary offences in logs and things that has been missed and then work that's being done to actually drive consistency and get that being done.
So when you go into the detail, sometimes a victim will contact us and make an allegation of a crime. And then as we investigate it, there might be historical offenders then reported to us. And whilst that is probably been investigated, if I'm honest, we've not gone back and then recorded those other crimes. So one might say that's an administrative failure, but we need to make sure we get that right. Another chunk of the failures that were identified is perhaps where we're looking at disputes, neighbourhood disputes. But actually, when you look at it through the lens of the rules, it breached into the level of criminality and harassment. So those, again, through our neighbourhood teams, may well have been responded to, but we've not recorded the crimes. So that's where you get into the complexities of the rules, and that's by no way an excuse. We need to make sure we've got it right and get them properly recorded on the right system, which in many of the cases is the police.
Thank you. That's useful. And there's some particular commentary in the report around rape and sexual offences, some domestic abuse related offences where reporting isn't where we want it to be. So Chief and I discussed rape investigations in our last one of these meetings. Can you share a bit more around the where you can see that improvement in reporting beginning to have an impact in relation to those offences?
So in relation to the domestic abuse, very often that's where we see the multiple offending. So that's a particular category that's prone to a victim has the strength to come forward. We deal with them through our dedicated team, and then a history of abuse might come out. We need to make sure that we properly record and chart and those things. There is elements within rape investigations where there's a provision within the rules that allow us to record the detail, but not crime it until we get face to face and have proper contact with that victim. We've tightened up that process, and what in effect we are now doing is where those circumstances apply, for the abundance of caution, we will crime as opposed to using another process that is legitimate, but we've just tightened up in there.
Thank you. And you touched upon where cases where there have been the investigation and that work with the victim was being done, but perhaps hadn't been in that physical recording. Have you been able to satisfy yourself that victims have been safeguarded effectively or haven't come to harm as a result of that crime not being recorded? When we were looking at this, we were really keen to try and identify if we had missed completely victims or whether someone had come to harm as a result of feeling our process. We haven't found any through what we have done. But of course, if someone is out there listening today that feels that they were a victim and we never listened, then please get back in touch. Thank you. I think that's a really important message. Isn't it? I want to just sort of final question. Like you referred to training requirements, a specific part of it, the systems and processes thing as well. There's also been a bit of a change of approach in the guidance, as I understand it, from sort of moving from we record and then investigate rather than we investigate and then report. And there's a bit of a sort of cultural shift in that. How are you seeing that progress in terms of that? If an allegation is made, that's recorded as a crime, and then we investigate the crime. What work are you doing kind of in trying to make that cultural shift?
So part of that is the review processes. So where a member of the public phones in, we use a system in order to deploy to them. That's not a crime system. So that's a different separate system. One of the parts that we've tightened up on is the QA of that log closure system to make sure that have we attended, recorded the crime, and then recorded the details on that system as opposed to within our incident command system. And that's one of the processes. We've invested additional staff into an additional training for a small number of teams to really get that QA.
Okay, thank you. I said that was the last question, so I'm not following on. So the time of the inspection, we were 80%. My understanding is that a good judgment would be sort of 94-ish and above. How far are we on that journey, would you say? And how confident are you, and perhaps by what timescale would you envisage getting to where a kind of good judgment might be, if that's what you're targeting?
So we think we're about halfway there, just over 89% at the minute. So we reconvened this chief officer group on Monday, and this was the top of the agenda. So we're now revisiting back into the plans, additional governments that one of the assistant chief counsel rules for us, to say, okay, what now, just to make that second step forward. So we've made significant progress, very targeted, and now we're just re-energising and making sure we make that final step into the 90s.
Okay, thank you. And this is something that I know that the chief officers keep a very close on through and other government meetings. So just thank you for the updates on that. There was in the recording crime section a further point made by the Inspectorate around the recording of data about ethnicity and some other protected characteristics. The Inspector identified Constabulary report age and gender very well, but there was some inconsistencies kind of beyond that. What work's going on to improve the recording of ethnicity data in particular, and that has a bearing around particular victimisation and targeting of particular groups potentially, and the importance therefore of having a good understanding of who might be.
So absolutely right. Again, we recognise that within the report, we could see through our own analysis about our data. There's lots of boxes to tick in some of our systems, as I'm sure you can imagine, and we have got moved in June 2024, so 2 months ago, we moved to a mandated element through one of our systems, so officers have to complete certain sections. So we don't want to be in a position where we mandate every single box and some of it's not applicable. But in relation to this, we're moving to a mandated system, so we'll see that again going through our data.
Okay, that's useful. Thank you. So that's that first section, and I think reiterate what the Deputy Constable said there, which is to encourage members of the public to report crimes to the police and to have confidence that those reports will be taken seriously. We'll move on into the next section, which was police powers and treating the public fairly and respectfully, which was rated as adequate in the report, and generally fairly favourable findings and commentary from the Inspectorate around how Constabulary uses its powers and how the oversight of the scrutiny of powers is used. There was some comments though about the recording of the use of force powers, where I think the Constabulary identified some inconsistencies, albeit some of what they'd identified was based on a kind of algorithm and assumption of what they might expect compared to what had been recorded. So that there is a comment to how that process works. Perhaps if you could have an update on what work the Constabulary is doing around the recording of use of force powers and ensuring there is sort of consistent and accurate recording by.
Yeah, certainly. So within the report, they pick out, given the number of arrests that we've had in that period in question, they would have expected to have seen us made formal records of the use of force. They reported that it appears below the number of records that we have, given the number of arrests that we've had when we compare with other forces, which is the algorithm that they have used within that. So we do have a system in place for officers to record when they have used force. They won't just be in arresting situations, but often be in arresting situations. So that can vary from a high level of force used on rare occasions to a much lower level. And we use that data to be able to understand the circumstances in which we use the force, which officers are using it, whether it's identified for the training needs, and to ensure that my use of force is both necessary and proportionate. And we've got a police powers board internally that all that information entered into so that we can check and monitor those trends. So I think what they've effectively picked up is predominantly that some of our lower level use of force in arrest cases is not being recorded in the way that which probably should be picked up, and the types of things that would be what we would describe as compliant handcuffing. So where individuals are arrested are handcuffed in the front to enable the officers to keep better control over them if there were to be some searching, for example, to ensure control of hands within that. Technically, they should be recorded as a use of force. In some circumstances, it is officers not being recorded though. So we put a particular focus into our custody environment where our arrested individuals come into. We strengthened that procedure. We've reminded officers that those use of force or indeed a holding a firm grip on someone to prevent them moving away, to make sure there clearly is a use of force which should record. And since we've done that, we've now seen a 20% increase in the number of reports that we're having through. So we're putting a system in place where we'll continue to monitor against the HMIC algorithm to ensure that we are broadly in a more commensurate place than was found when the report was taking place, to see that our level of recording is indeed where we might expect that to be.
Yeah, I think that certainly suggests that's having some impact in terms of that ignorance. Thank you. There's some comments in the report around officers' communication with the public when dealing with incidents, and particularly notes occasions where officers perhaps communicate with language maybe slightly provocative or maybe slightly bad language, particularly in sort of high risk or quite stressful environments, which can escalate tensions rather than de-escalating. What's the Constable doing to look at training and sort of processes for monitoring and improving that communication?
Sure. This can be a challenging job, and I know you know that. And some of the situations we ask our officers to deal with can be difficult, volatile, particularly on the street within that. And certainly my experience being looking at things like body worn video footage, I think often some of our officers sort of commending for the restraint that actually show in what are often quite provocative circumstances where they are being provoked by members of the public for various reasons. I think we accept that occasionally some officers maybe do respond to that in a way that we would, rather they wouldn't. We embed a lot of the communications training in throughout many areas of our training program. Within that, we've recently completed a stop and search video that a member of the public has kindly helped us with, who has experience of being stopped and searched, to help officers understand how individuals can feel when they are stopped, and how invasive that can be. Perhaps maybe explain some of the reaction that officers may get from individuals at times to help them be more empathetic and sensitive when they are conducting powers such as that on the streets. And then in addition to that, we are in line with some national curriculum changes. We are fundamentally changing our officer personal public safety training in the way that officers engage people on the street, particularly where they may consider they need to use, may get to a position where they need to use force. And that training is very much being focused around communication, de-escalation techniques, how to speak to people in a way that will de-escalate situations rather than escalate them. And the whole purpose of that is to prevent the officers needing to use force, and of course that's good for the members of the public because there should be less instances where we need to use force against them. It's also good for the officer as well because we do know in both those situations, either the public and/or the officer stands to increased risk of getting injured. So that communication training is getting embedded into that training.
And thank you for that. And I've said when I've been out with officers, seen some really good examples given by student officers of really, really good communication with the public that has really gained control over a situation, de-escalated things. And so clearly that training is good. And that. Okay, thank you for the update on that. We're going to preventing and deterring crime and antisocial behaviour and reducing vulnerability. So this was graded good by the Inspectorate, and there's a lot of positive commentary in this section, and indeed some examples of promising limited practice. Identified, particularly building on the prevention first work that you've really championed, Chief Constable, in your time. Perhaps I could just ask you to just reflect on the impact that's having, how particularly it's been drawn out in some of the really positive practice in this section.
Yeah, certainly, and we have a very clear prevention first strategy across the whole organisation. We've had that for a few years now, and we are proud of it. We think it makes a difference, and it is effectively based on we firmly believe that the public would much rather something not happen at all in the first place, rather than it had happened and then policing needs to investigate. And that's, we think, good for the public if we can reduce time by preventing it in the first place. But it was also good for the organisation and the officers because if we don't need to then get involved in all the investigations and work that follows in that way. Clearly, we're never going to prevent everything. But we have put a really strong focus into this area, and I have to say it's embedded really strongly across the force, and I think that's all out in the report as well. And it spawns much in a bit of practice all across the organisation. And some of those are quite small scale initiatives, others are more significant organisational wide ones, but we take very much approach with encouraging officers and staff to get really involved with this work and prevention better the cure in our view around that. So the report itself picks out a number of examples of projects and programmes of work. There are more sides that they could have pulled on. So Operation Chrysalis is an example where you see mentioned in the report, which is a programme for perpetrators around particularly domestic abuse situations, recognising some offenders move from victim to victims and they develop new relationships. So the focus here is we've been on, let's work with the offender. What is it about their behaviour? What's going on in their lifestyle? Why do they act in this way? And how can we put some intensive interventions into them to try and break this cycle of offending that they have been in? And that's showing some really positive actions in terms of going forwards. We work really closely with partner organisations around this. Prevention works really well with housing providers, local authorities, and others. And it just feels like it's been a good step forward for us. And we've been very focused on our neighbourhood policing activity, and the neighbourhood teams absolutely get this and are delivering it day to day across the country.
Thank you. And I would absolutely agree. I think most members of the public would want to not be a victim of crime in the first place. So that prevention and deterrence is critical. I think the constabulary's had a lot of really positive impacts in this area, which is really good to see. And actually, some of the case studies that you mentioned you guys actually some of the data coming out to Christmas, for example, is really impressive in terms of reducing reoffending, which is really good. There's a bit of commentary in this report around the sort of consistency and quality of problem-solving plans within neighbourhood teams. Is that something you're concerned about? What work's been done to look at that?
I think they picked up that there could be more consistency. I think what they have found is that plans do exist. We know is absolutely what I want. We have a team that helps pick out good practice in there, and usually that's spread around the force. So that if a neighbourhood team comes across an issue in the community that they need to deal with, needs a problem-solving approach, they can draw on some of the practice that's taken place elsewhere. So there's some of the things that may have worked, or indeed may not have worked elsewhere. The plans are put together often they involve other organisations within this as well. We ask our officers to document those so that they can describe the actions that are taking place and have taken place. There are some really good examples of them across the force. I think within the inspection, the team picked up that some of them are not as well developed as others. So we are putting some work in to try and improve the standards where they do need improving to help the officers understand how to complete these plans as well. But notwithstanding that, I've seen lots of effort of this prevention and problem-solving work taking place, and it's maybe no great surprise that given the size of the constabulary and the different communities that we work in, one or two of them could do a little bit of additional work to get them up to the standard of best.
And thank you for that. That was a very positive section. Great. Going to the responding to the public section, a lot of which sits around sort of controlling data that the inspectorate will look at. And there's a few areas sort of the inspectorate have raised around crime evidence preservation advice to callers, call handling, and sort of looking at vulnerability in non-emergency calls. And this probably goes a little bit to your point you come to earlier about resources in the control room, doesn't it? In terms of that very, very strong link between resources and what data might say in the control room. And I'll also certainly just observe that a lot of what the inspectorate are measuring is quite narrow in terms of emergency responses. We're measuring the first 10 seconds of a 999, not what response follows from that. And I'm very clear that the member of the public rings 999, that's because they want a response to where they are. And actually, that's not quite what's being measured here. So my little context around that thing. We'll start with the point in the report around the consistency of advice by call handlers around preservation of evidence and crime prevention. What processes have you put in place around that, and what are the sort of quality assurance process to check that advice?
So this is one of the areas I described the work that's been done within the control room and communication centre for well over a year now, and we have underestimated the pressure some of our call handlers feel to answer the phone, but then get the quality of when we do pick up the phone and getting that right. It's a fine balance there. And in line with our prevention first, of course, we want to be giving crime prevention advice to people at the first point of contact with us, and also how to preserve evidence to be the best option for the potential evidence. We have, so we tightened up our processes. I'll come on to how we're dealing with some of the demand that comes into the room to give us more time for the qualitative aspect, which we have done. And just to set some numbers against this for the Commissioner, when we were inspected in 21-22, so that was the previous inspection, HMI found that in 34% of cases were given preservation of evidence advice. In this inspection, 60%, so that is improvement. We have our own internal audit, and when that was conducted earlier this year, that improved to 90%. In relation to crime prevention, the previous inspection found 58% compliance with what would be expected. The current inspection that's just been published, that improved to 78%. And then internal audit, checking mechanism shows that's 89%. So really significant improvements in this area. And that's been enabled by looking and understanding the demands that goes into the control, and in some ways dealing with that in a more appropriate way. There's also now we've rolled out automatic direction to crime prevention advice. It's on our website as well. So again, we'll be measuring the impact of that.
Great, that's helpful. Thank you, and obviously I appreciate the link between the longer that conversation takes, the impact that has on them, when the next call's being answered. So it's a bit of sort of slow facing in both directions on this. I think inevitably. In terms of that, the sort of call handling and response to calls for service, and something that Chief looked at before, and essentially what the report says is that no police force nationally meets the national standard on 999 call answering, which raises perhaps a separate question nationally. But can you talk me through how you're working on that performance, where you're assessing the kind of appropriateness of the resource going into that area, and how at risk of that has all been managed?
Exactly as you said, Commissioner, the national target answering 999 within 10 seconds is only part of a very long process. If people are phoning 999, generally they're phoning the continuous, and I suspect if I was to ask the public, they'd say, answer the phone quickly, but more importantly, get to us. So, and as you say, HMI don't see any force hitting that currently. Just so to reassure people who may be watching, we're very close. So currently our 999 for this year is 85% within 10 seconds, 88% this month, and November is actually when we see more calls coming through. So that's set against increasing demand. But if I say the average time to answer a 999 call is found in 6 seconds, and very often 10 seconds might not be met, but it's 11 seconds. And actually, what impact does that really have in terms of our response? In terms of people phoning us on 101, within 90 seconds is how we measure. We're achieving that in 67% of cases at the minute. We still see some room for improvement there. In terms of our response, so from the point of picking up the phone, we do measure how long it takes us to get to immediate calls. So you risk assess how long does it take us, and in 76% of cases we get there within 15 minutes. And that's regardless of whether that's an urban or rural location. I know there's discussions nationally around what would the measure be, but we take a broad approach, very time, 15 minutes, and we'll get there within 76% of cases currently. And in relation to phone calls within an hour, it's currently 63%. And again, that's improvement, and we see plenty of improvements coming. Some of the work that's driven that is better use of technology. So we've got people that can actually deal with calls through video. So someone can phone in and it can be diverted to an officer to deal with them there and then on video. So actually cutting out some of that travelling time if it's appropriate. And then we've really pushed the Constabulary last year for our officers out on the street, the control and the assessment, and identify the most appropriate resource, and then they deploy them, as opposed to a conversation to say who's free now, sometimes encrypting So we're targeting really signposting to the organisation. It's important. We've got a contract with the public to get to you. We need help, and that's what we're endeavour to do. And then some of the work that touched on in the previous question, we know that about half of our calls coming into our one-on-one system are not people that want to either report crime or require our attendance. So we've been doing a lot of work to understand what those calls were and then get actually a more appropriate response for those individuals that perhaps meets their needs better. By way of example, a lot of those calls were people looking for the crime number or who's the investigating officer. So we've got technology that pushes that out to them, so prevents that coming into the control room. People phoning in asking because they perhaps received a fixed penalty notice for a traffic offence, phoning in and asking for details. We'll then signpost them to a more appropriate manner where they can get at first point of contact to help them. That's freeing up for us around 7,000 to 8,000 calls per month at the moment. So prevention first, brought to life within the control environment, people getting the service that they want and need, first point of contact, then creating more capacity within our control to deal with those emergencies and public calls better.
Thank you, that's useful. And there's a bit around sort of where there are them delays in response in the report. How do you expect call handlers to manage the public's expectations where there might be a delay in response?
So if we grade a call, I'll be with you. If for whatever reason we're not going to meet that time, then we have a callback facility. So those are identified and we have callback, and we track that through on a daily basis with the scorecard. And then equally, sometimes we have callers who we identify as repeat, so we're good at identifying them as repeat victim or a vulnerable victim. We record them as such so we get additional support later on. We've now got a system within the control room that through colour coding raises those people back to the top of the list if we've not responded within the time scales set, because we perhaps need to risk assess because of the domain. So a number of processes to time. And I have got confidence in the direction that our control room has gone in. And I think it's been good work with them once we.
Thank you. Final question on this section is some reference in the report to perhaps occasions where there might be some risk or vulnerability in non-emergency calls that are sitting in a log waiting for a deployment where it hasn't been raided as a immediate or a prompt. Can you talk me through the work that's being done to look at the oversight and review mechanisms for those to ensure that there isn't risk and vulnerability sitting there for too long? Should be
and absolutely right. And the colour coded system that I described in response to the last actually extends through all of our calls. So if someone is recorded as a repeat victim or a vulnerable victim and we've not got to them in an appropriate time, it automatically comes back up to a system within the control room that requires us to go back in, re-risk assess, on occasion recontact those victims and members of the public to make sure that they're not increased risk because of any form of delay in our response.
Thank you very much. We'll go on to the next section, which is investigating crime, and that's where it requires improvement by the Inspectorate. Can I start by asking what work the Constabulary is doing to look at the effectiveness and supervision of investigations, and particularly focusing on the use of outcome 18, which is where investigations complete the reason the suspect identified, which is a bit higher than the national average in Hertfordshire. What work's been done to look at that?
So we commissioned internally a review months back on the last year around national best practice and what does good supervision on a crime look like. As a result of that, we refreshed all our internal operating procedures. We enhanced training for supervisors, and then we put in place quite a robust mechanism to check that learning was then getting translated into effective supervision, effective plans to investigate on crimes, and then effective supervision of these plans and making sure progress was being made. And we tracked through last year through our own internal QA audit processes. We tracked those improvements through it, and within period, we made improvements since the previous one, but by March, April time, through our assessment, we were compliant with HMR requirements in about 95% of cases. So real significant change on that. That's been a real shift of focus for our frontline, and we're still walking that and making sure that through those supervision, through that better work on the investigations, we're actually seeing better outcomes from public, making sure we get these outcomes right, and positive outcomes where the evidence is there. In relation to the outcome 18, specific element that was mentioned in HMR, get into the realms of performance data, and there's actually a number of ways that nationally police outcomes are looked at. HMI have one view, which is what they've reported on. There is other ways to look at our data. Internally, we don't look at it in quite the same way that HMI does. And I've already started a conversation with your office to see if there's agreement on which measures that we ought to use. They're both valid. There's no rights or wrongs here. They're both valid, but are we really clear on what HMI found, the methodology that's used, and are we clear internally what we're going to use to judge? And we do through a monthly performance meeting. I look at comparative data across the country, across a group of several forces that are being similar to us. So we're always looking internally, but benchmarking across. In relation to the outcome 18 specifically, HMI have used a different methodology than we, and that's not a criticism, it's just the reality. We need to do it slightly different.
Yeah. I think there's been some reference to feedback from supervisors that they don't always have time to complete crime reviews, which obviously is part of that supervision work to give a young service workforce. What's the department doing to respond to that capacity, I guess?
So there's and we do hear that coming back from the organisation. So with our task.ask, the control room tasking resource, very often our supervisors in the front line are actually involved in those conversations and reviewing them. So we're really clear that's been control room to do. So we increased some capacity in our frontline supervisors, but really pleased with what we want them to do. As part of our uplift programme, we invested in 25 additional frontline sergeants. So we increased the number, we've increased the capacity. We still recognise the feedback we get from the organisation. However, we've put in place a lot of support around the numbers of crimes or workloads and trying to give people the experience to move through those more quickly, deliver outcomes quicker, because very often if you leave something, the risk of not getting a positive outcome actually increases. So deal with it as best we can. First time vastly, we've seen a marked reduction in the number of crimes that are live on our system through the help and the support that we're giving. And then in some cases, the additional training that's gone into our supervisors, I think that's sometimes it takes a bit of time for that to embed, for people to get the muscle memory and then really understand what it's doing. So yes, it's been a bit. There has been some pain in the organisation around that. We do listen to our workforce, but we need to improve our standards in terms of environment installation. And if the solution has been put in place can't be sustained over the long term. We need to find other solutions, but the solution is not to having vector supplement.
Okay, thank you. And obviously, putting those extra sergeants in themselves would have needed time to get into roles and get up to speed, but you're confident the direction of travel.
Direction of travel.
Thank you. There's some reference in the report to the completion recording of victim needs assessments, and again a point around consistency in some cases there. What works the Constabulary do to look at that?
So some of this we put a technical fix in January time. That those things sound easy, but they actually take time. So we have been working on it in the background. We saw almost an immediate shift in the completion of victim needs assessments, and our current figure conditions on big improvement. Yeah, we did have, I should say, we did have secondary processes prior to January that sort of captured up and made sure that we were identifying people that needed additional support. But we moved that upstream to try and get to the possible contact. 84% improvement. It's not a lot to go on there. But there's a lot of work now looking at the report with signing diaries. Completing the assessment is one thing, but is it real? Is it bespoke? Does it remove victims? So there's a lot of QA goes on just to make sure that we not only do them, but we do them well.
Thank you. And then that's 16% that then aren't being done. What would be the reasons why that wouldn't be done? Would that be around the victim not wanting it to be done, or there being an assessment of risk that doesn't justify it? Just through that.
There might be a couple of days where they won't be done. Sometimes, if you have a victim with multiple, if they're a victim of multiple crimes, you don't do the assessment twice. It's not captured. So I'm not sure we'll ever reach 100%. And then, yeah, some people phone in, they just want the crime recorded, they want the crime number and move on. And so
do you have sort of taking all that into account? Do you have a figure in your mind of when you'd be comfortable if we got to a particular level and went, okay, I think we're across the risk, we're providing a good service? Do you have a sense of where that might be if 100% is never going to be done?
I'm not sure I do it more. I think what we're reassured by is when the audits and the QA processes tell us we haven't missed any and we're done to a high standard.
But a little bit of work to do.
Well, I think there's a little bit of work to do, more importantly than the quality aspect.
Sure.
Certainly within my
but a lot of progress, which is good. Okay. We'll go on to protecting vulnerable people. That was also great, but requires improvement. A few areas I wanted to ask about in here. So firstly, around the operation of the domestic violence disclosure scheme, known as Clare's Law, which is about making disclosures to the new heart of someone about someone who might have a domestic abuse history. At the point when the Inspectorate looked at the data, we were sitting at the lowest in the country for the use of those accounts. That was sort of over a year ago. I know there's been quite a bit of work done since that point to try and drive some improvements in that area. Can you give me an update on where we're currently sitting around both live applications and the number that gone over the 28-day notice period, something with special commenting on that data?
Yeah, certainly. And I think they rightly identified this is an area we need to sharpen up practice in. I'm quite confident we've done that period. There's been a refocusing of the resource in there to ensure these have appropriate attention and more resource going in to manage this and some of the other things around orders and related with as well. But in terms of the data, so the Peel report said in the 12-month period, we report to the end of September last year we recorded 262 right last applications. With a comparison so far this year since January, that number that we've recorded is 567, so that's more than doubled. Albeit, that's not even the full year period we're talking about there. And in terms of the right to know applications, say over the period in September 23, we've recorded 15. So far this year, since January, that's 284. So there's a really significant step change in the numbers there, which I think underlines that that's moved on. Within those categories, we've made many disclosures as well. The first one that I talked about, most 50% of those applications have resulted in disclosures. And in terms of the number that are outstanding over 28 days, clearly it's important that we process this quickly, particularly if people are entering into new relationships and seeking some reassurance about a new partner. We look to disclose them within 28 days. We weren't as prompt as we needed to be, but that has improved. And in total, out of all those applications, and said there are 19 that have gone over that 28-day period. And that, again, is a significant improvement on the numbers that we found previously. I think I would still like to tighten the subject further, so more resourcing, more focus going in there to do that. But I think what I've quoted, you can see really fundamentally different position than the one that's wanted report.
And that is really reassuring and really considerable progress made there, which is important. As you say, ultimately that's about protecting people from harm and prevention in that as well. So that's really good to see the volumes that have been gone through and the number of disclosures being made. We've talked on a few occasions through these meetings around the approach to protecting and protective powers, which are incredibly important in allowing that preventative work and safeguarding work with victims and indeed trying to prevent being victims in the first place. And what's the Constabulary's thinking about how that progress is sustained and embedded long term across the whole range of us? Because touching on the players of scheme here, but actually there are a huge number of protective powers and orders available. So what's the Constabulary's thinking about progress and sustainability in those areas?
Yeah, there are a large number of orders. Many of those orders have been introduced in the last few years through various bits of legislation. Some of the work that we've been doing, which I'm confident is taking hold now, starting to change the culture of the organisation of investigators to really apply for and use these orders. Yeah. At times, they take some work to apply for. And as a result of that, we have a fairly small team at the moment, which we are now bolstering, to dedicate themselves to support officers and investigators wherever they are in the organisation with the range of orders and how to apply for them and how to obtain them. And the data that we're tracking is already showing some sort of improvement in our orders. Not only once the orders are in place, we need to make sure they're enforced as well. And that they are checked on, and the orders invariably put various conditions on an offender to do or not to do certain things, and if they are breached, then they usually lend themselves powers of arrest and for us to conduct back to the courts. And this is what we follow through there as well. So we are creating a specialist team that will focus particularly on the orders at the centre of the increase of there, so that we can ensure that we are making full use of all the orders which run to different types of orders, various different things, and we can make full use of them.
Thank you. That's very welcome. Welcome direction of travel. And I'd anticipate that as you said, along coming in recent years as public awareness, particularly to the ones that the public can ask for disclosures grows, that workload is probably going to increase. Do you have a view at this stage of both the work that Constabulary might need to do around raising awareness, but also making sure that we keep pace with that demand?
Yeah, so one of the things that we will do is track through our performance data, the number of orders that have been applied for, check that against the percentages of those incidents and crimes that we are managing, and inspect that with, the ratios are going to be in the right place. Check that our officers are applying for them and asking for them and identifying appropriate cases where orders may be appropriate. So again, that data, we need to monitor that. And then as we see the demand changes within that data, we'll clearly need to keep an eye on the results to be able to manage that process as a whole. Just ensuring that we've got sight over the numbers and where we would expect the numbers to be, given the cases that we are managing. And I'm already confident that process is looking stronger, as I've described to you, and that there is a clear sight on what we expect the levels to be.
Thank you. One question on protective orders. So we've talked quite a little bit through this meeting around consistency, quality, training. We've delivered a step change in the number of those disclosures done, which is really good. Are you satisfied that you've got in place the arrangements to check the quality and consistency of those disclosures, and the way that work is being done to the standard that you expect?
Partly the purpose of the team that I've been speaking about, because there is some complexity in this. Some of the orders and the requirements do take some specialist knowledge. That's why we need to put those specialists in place. But we've also been speaking to the organisation more widely about these processes and the orders and the availability of them, and to the training to the investigators and frontline officers, more generally, to make sure that we're raising the awareness. The fact that there then are places where you can go where individuals understand this in more depth and detail, doing part of that would be ensuring.
There were some comments in the report around the safeguarding hub and how it was handling referrals and sort of balance between resourcing and demand, for that reliance on time in places to deal with that. How are you reviewing that and responding to those issues?
The safeguarding hub, part of what it does is take incidents that we've been involved with or become aware of, and bring further detail into other organisations, principally local authorities, children's social services, and individuals, so that they can undertake their safeguarding responsibilities and support around those people as well. And we do refer a significant number of cases in, and the details are within the report. One of the things the hub does is give the information we use is incomplete. Needs additional information. We've been going back to the officers to get that information. The weakness that was identified was they wouldn't do a fast follow-up to ensure all the information came back in. Most of the officers did refer. We didn't have a strong case process through this. So that's now been corrected and put in place. And there is an expectation that the hub makes those referrals even without the full range of information at the time, but we just still chase it and ensure it comes back through. So that's already been tightened up. We know, an example of having we know of the referrals that we make, around about 7% of them do not then lead to further action by the agencies receiving that anyway. So we are referring many things into them that don't then require further action. But of course, it's appropriate that those other agencies have the opportunity to make that decision for themselves, and we don't second guess what is being done. And we have a new chief superintendent overseeing this whole area, part of his work is looking at the way the demand is being managed and ensuring the processes are absolutely robust and in place that we need them to be. And that, of course, includes speakers of the local involved as well.
Thank you. That's useful. And I was struck by that figure around the percentage, very high percentage that then don't result in further action in other agencies, and would suggest to me actually that the Constable is taking quite a cautious approach around safeguarding and making those referrals where there might be some concern and need to further action. So that's in terms of probably best to be making more referrals than fewer into my confidence. So that's reassuring to hear. There's some this identified in this section around work that the Constable is doing with social services around adults who go missing, highly vulnerable adults with dementia or Alzheimer's disease, those sorts of conditions. Can you just tell me a bit more about how that work has been going and some of the benefits that are being seen through that work to protect very, very vulnerable adults?
Certainly. So we run something called Operation Salmon, which is an extension of our referral scheme. Actually, we run another scheme called Operation Compass, which around young people who may be missing or have issues, perhaps of domestic abuse, where we ensure that the schools are made aware that they've actually contacted the police for various reasons to help them manage those individuals within the school environment and maybe give some explanation to the behaviour that they may be seeing from young people. When that's a really mature way to do that. So we've extended that and into older people as well. So individuals who may be suffering with dementia, Alzheimer's, who may have periods of time missing from home. As we know, sadly, some people with dementia and Alzheimer's are very confused, and they may be found in the streets, sometimes some distance from home. So we are ensuring that that information, in the same way of trying to safeguard and help protect those vulnerable people, is being referred at an early stage into social services, so they can consider what that means for individuals' treatment, managing those conditions within the community or within care settings around that. And in one way, partly why I just pointed out that we are referring a large number of these cases that we're doing for adults as well as for children, and the whole intention of that is providing better care for those individuals, ensuring that the agencies who have particular safeguarding caring responsibilities are well informed about what we have been seeing through incidents that policing has come across.
Thank you very much. And it's really positive to read. That's good. Going to the next section, which is about managing offenders and suspects. That's been claimed as adequate by the Inspectorate. There's a couple of areas that the Inspectorate identified that I just wanted to look at. So firstly, in relation to the management of registered sex offenders and how that risk is being dealt with. There's been a commentary in the inspection around sort of previous decisions to step away from sort of national practice on that and do a slightly different approach nationally. Perhaps I'll just ask for your reflections around that and how that's been reviewed and how that area of work is going.
There's a robust national process and indeed local process around how we manage registered sex offenders. There's a very clear risk assessment process to classify individuals who are low risk. This is an area that we do make good use of civil orders as well, conditions onto individuals, and that may involve locations, reporting requirements, access to digital devices, the internet, and we did follow that up and check that robustly. What the inspection found out is for in the low risk category where it has been determined that some of these individuals can move into a reactive monitoring regimes, that we've not been completely following the national authorised professional practice around that. We've identified that, and we've gone back and said we need to get fully back into line. That's particularly where we have in the past made a decision that we have cross subject of civil orders and moving into that reactive phase. We expect we just need to change that and make sure that in full alignment with national guides in this area, and we're in the process of checking through our standard operating practices that applied within the team to do that. But interestingly, we are a force, not all forces do this, but we are a force that uses the polygraph quite extensively, and I think we were pretty much the first force in the country that did this, and it's something that we use in order to ask questions of our registered sex offenders and check that they are effectively giving straightforward answers to us. It's proved very effective in helping us understand the risk that is posed by individuals. But that side, we recognise we've got to completely ensure we're absolutely in line. We've been slightly outstep, not massively, but slightly on one area, and we'll just bring that back into line.
Okay, and is there a sort of rough timescale when you'd expect that to be?
Well, the team's already been asked to do that, and so we're just in the process of checking that with some of our central capacities, but the practice they now say are now working to. We're just double checking and making sure those in place. I would expect that answer within the next
in terms of the overall management of the risk and sort of structure and governance around that, you're sounded broadly satisfied that is robust and
I'm satisfied we're really focused on it. Absolutely. And we will continue to make sure that that's we do need to correct this issue and ensure it has been corrected.
Okay, thank you. There's been a bit of commentary about child online safeguarding investigations and the kind of updating of intelligence and reviewing of investigations, particularly in relation to checks around bail conditions, like those sorts of things. What's been done to review that and ensure that the checks that the Inspectorate are highlighting are being done and
So the report identified actually we're pretty good at chasing down the intelligence, making the intelligence assessments when these cases first come to us, developing appropriate plans and responses to that, to how the investigation should take place. What we do notice, many of these cases involve analysis of digital devices and forensic analysis. That can take some time. It's often quite complex. And the report identified that in not all cases are we then going back where there is a period of time and refreshing what we know about that case and the intelligence and making sure any further risk assessments are adjusted that may change given the period of time waiting. So we accept that. We've been back in, we've briefed all our staff involved, we've increased capacity within the team for them to be able to do those intelligence checks to ensure that more members of the team have access to the police national database, and which will help inform that. And I think we're confident that the position is now different. And relatively small group of individuals that are doing this, and we've made it very clear that this is a gap in their practice that they need to address. And the the operating practices of that change to the moment.
Moving to the next section, building, supporting and protecting the workforce, which was very adequate. And there was some positive commentary around support and wellbeing measures in place to support the staff across the constabulary. There were perhaps inevitably, given some of the demand and complexity that's been highlighted, some comments around workload impacting people's well-being, the demands on overtime, people need to be doing work and rest days, all those sorts of things. How have you taken that feedback to look at workloads and wider well-being support available for both officers and staff?
So on this one, we were disappointed for another reason in relation to this public. When we received the draft, that's the area that we actually pushed back on with the Inspectorate to say we don't think we've properly reflected on what the organisation has done in this area, and suggested that the plan to be good. So I have taken a view on that and published the report. But there is a comprehensive wellbeing offer in this constabulary for colleagues. I think one of the nuances of what's written, one of the challenges for us is to make sure that everybody understands exactly what that offer is, even if they don't need it themselves, so that there's not this misunderstanding that the support's not there, because the support absolutely is in the room. We've got in Andy Rose, who was our ex-chief constable of Lancashire, who smashed it on this coming look at what we're all offering, and it was a tick in terms of his view, and it goes to officers that are involved in traumatic incidents, making sure that we get support back to them, right the way down to what we call post points. So where people sometimes just need to put their hand up and just say, I just need to put a time on. And that happens within the control room and other rollouts on the street. We just need to power people to say, I've just dealt with something, I just need to take more than you, and sort of ease that pressure on them. Policing is tough, but I think there's been a step change in policing over a number of years now, that we recognise the welfare and the pressures on the officers and staff. We have looked at workloads. We do know there's pressure in our system, and demand on policing is increasing. And the reality of the uplift programme is we don't have all our officers and staff in the correct places, because we're rapidly recruiting. So we know there's different pressures in different parts of the organisation. We need those officers to come through training, and we need to make sure through our force review, where we are assessing demand and the pressures, we will make sure that we get those individuals in to manage the demand, as well as looking, is there a way we can manage that demand in a different way? Not necessarily stop doing things, albeit that might be an answer for some respect, but is there a way, can we use technology better to enable the demand placed on it? But we were disappointed that in our view, recognised just the breadth of work in the balance.
And yes, it's certainly really clear, significant that it's done, and it's really that's always very to officers who we ask in the society to do important work to protect the public, and that support around them is essential. So thank you for that update. Going to the sort of piece around standards and behaviours, very clear commentary in the report. The sales chief officer team more broadly sets and communicates very clear expectations on culture and standards. I've seen that from the work that you've both been doing in the time I've been in my role. But there are some figures in the report, in the workforce survey, that suggests that there are some mixed views amongst the workforce around calling out behaviour. So Constabulary's run some campaigns around that in the past, and you know, really a question mark. There's some people in the workforce who care about sample sizes, about would they feel confident reporting inappropriate behaviour, how do they think that would be dealt with, and so on. What's your reflection on that, on that bit of commentary in the report, and particularly thinking about maybe where other officers or staff are victims of that behaviour in the report, and how they support?
It's really interesting. As part of, we do an annual forum, Chief Spring Forum, we call it. We bring in every member of our police and family into that. And one of the questions we asked towards the end of our sessions, about 400 people at the time, was how confident would you be? And it's really interesting when you see what cloud it was at, and ranged from really confident to not confident. So I think there's a different picture. Different people have different levels of confidence. Some of it perhaps through people's experience. We do have reporting mechanisms in place that are entirely confidential. People want to use those. And then we have in the past received feedback that perhaps those individuals have not received the support. So we've enhanced that to make sure that our complaints investigation deal with it in an appropriate way, and that those people who have the courage to report wrongdoing are supported either through line management, through our complaints department, through support groups, through staff associations, to make sure that people have courage to come forward and support them. And then, of course, we've got a whole range of options to deal with conduct in the workplace to make sure that the standards that the public expect of us all in policing are met. And where people get that wrong on occasion, doesn't mean to say everybody has to be dismissed. We've got a very long range, which on occasion is just asking someone to reflect on how do you think that might come across. Obviously, not all the way through to the serious cases when dismissed. And then the culture within our organisation is really important to make sure that public service comes first. And we self-check all the time. And yes, we have confidential reporting lines and so on and so forth that are available. But equally, I'd like to see officers just call it out there and then with each other. And I think that's where you really get standards on the team, where just have a conversation, say, I'm not company with that. And that those little things matter in terms of our standards and company.
Thank you. One of the things that emerged from some of the national reports and reviews following the horrendous cases around Sarah Everard and other cases of incredibly serious wrongdoing by officers outside Hertfordshire was around a concern, perhaps in policing sometimes, around whether you'll be labelled a troublemaker when you call out inappropriate behaviour. In the survey that the Inspectorate did, of those people who didn't report things, around a third said that's because they were worried about potentially being labelled as a troublemaker, which is absolutely not what we would want at all. What are you doing to discourage that feeling, culture, fear, worry, whatever it might be, that actually you are the person who reports something inappropriate and calls it out and says, no, this isn't right. You themselves aren't seen as the problem. What's going on around that? Because that's really serious in terms of people's confidence to report and set those standards within those things.
Absolutely. So, and as I say, the processes are there and the support mechanisms are there, and I think we've enhanced them. One of the things that we've got a couple of things that we do in the organisation. One is within our complaints investigation, we've got preventing. So we identify where reports are coming in, and our reports get released. So we know that people are using those facilities. But where perhaps we're not seeing reports coming in, then is that good? Or is that culture that people are afraid to speak up? So we have a small prevent team that can go in and just talk to officers and staff around the importance of getting the culture right and what support is there for them. And equally, if we've had an investigation where perhaps a team have not spoken up and it's become apparent that a person's behaviour is wrong, we can go back into that and again appropriate way and just have a conversation. So, why don't you not understand it? So all the time, it's getting the balance right to encourage and push the culture in the right direction without seeking to blame everything that may or may not be involved. So it's just getting the balance right.
Okay, thank you. And does that process look at any cases where people have then, regarded the complainant or the person who's raised that concern as a troublemaker? Is that then reviewed in terms of that behaviour and conduct of putting pressure on people not to report things or treating people differently if they have?
It has been reviewed, but usually where it's not been picked up early enough. So sometimes we see people making legal claims against us. So where we see that come through, I've been victimised because of, then of course we go back in and review lessons and share the background around the numbers.
Thank you. But I think what I'm hearing from you is we would want officers and staff to speak up, to raise concerns, and expect that's dealt with. We talk a lot in these meetings around some of the strategic and operational decisions that the chief officers make. How do you ensure officers and staff understand the reasons behind those decisions? Especially perhaps where those people were directly affected by it, or maybe aren't quite in the same place in terms of the rationale for that. How you, as a chief officer, do you trying to build understanding and so consensus, but kind of broader organisational buy-in to make it possible?
Yeah, we've been discussing this great deal. So there is a lot of communication about it within the organisation. I think the challenge often is people are busy and their access to those communication channels can be difficult. So how do we hit the sweet spot where we can get that information out to people? And we also not unreasonably expect the management chain to be cascading those reasons and decisions and be able to outline the reasons for that. We know it's not always being received or understood in the way that we may wish that to be. So we have been active with things like past executive programs where anybody in the organisation can pose questions and we will explain our thinking around those things, why certain decisions have been made. Sometimes that leads us to reviewing decisions as well. That is a channel to use. But I think we need to find some ways of doing this more effectively. With a big organisation, almost 4,500 people, it was apparent to us that not always people are understanding the reasons why certain decisions have been made or have not been made within that. So yesterday, for example, we had many of our senior leaders together for a full day. This was a very active conversation with them about the expectations on all of us to help explain this decision, but equally demonstrate that they are listening to the whole workforce and organisation, and that's being used to inform the decision making as well. Actually, get back to I think we're still at the sweet spot, honestly, around that, and it's a balance between not giving information overload, but ensuring that they really need to know that type of
Thank you. I think I've jumped into the next section actually with that question, so apologies for that. So that's in the leadership and reporting management section, which we'll move into now, which was where this requires improvement. So that kind of picks up on that question around sort of wider engagement around decisions. Was there a bit in the section around the use of data and analysis, and the Inspectorate slightly pointed in different directions, in that both saying that there was a bit of work to be done around the use of data analysis, and then saying there was really limited practice around bringing data scientists in and using data, so slightly different directions on that. Unpick that for me a little bit, if you would, in terms of the reflections around constabulary's use of data and analysis.
So I think I would probably say we are swimming in data. Yeah, we've got plenty of data about what's happening in the organisation. But we've obviously touched on quite a bit of it through this meeting this morning as well. We do have data scientists who, as you would expect, is excellent at statistical analysis, using data, looking at the data, and we're getting some real good value from that, from some of the work that we asked the individual to do to interpret the data that we have got, and also bring conclusions out that we can then use an organisation to adjust procedures and change practice within there. I think the other thing, Sharon, that if we look across the organisation as a whole, I think it's true in many organisations, there are some people within it who are very comfortable with data, good at interpreting, using data to understand how their areas are functioning. Others, there are equally people who are far less comfortable with data and find it more difficult to understand what it's from. And I think that becomes particularly acute when there's so much data. How do we help them as to what the data is within this? We do know that we've got many data. We use Power BI extensively to calculate and analyse the data we've got from many of those applications. It's reporting on performance in different parts of the business. Where I think we have a gap, which does need plugging, is there's almost too much of that, and knowing where to go and when we do find that data precisely when it's coming, we need to find a way of simplifying that for the whole organisation. I think in bringing those key reporting metrics into one single place so that we get a view of the organisation, and then individuals, if they need to delve into some bits, can do so. But we haven't got that. Those two metrics all coming together in a coherent way. That's what it is.
That's helpful. Thank you. And I just wanted to sort of finally on this, just ask about the recommendations around the commentary around the force review process, which really was suggesting that there's more to be done to look at the effectiveness and efficiency of the operating model. And there's been quite a lot of work done across the force as part of that process to do exactly that. Perhaps if I could just ask what your reflections are on that finding and what further work might be needed.
Frankly, I'm a bit frustrated by this comment because we launched a full review of the force and operating model 2 months ago. We recognised that it was an enormous piece of work and needed to look at the whole organisation, but we couldn't do that all in one go immediately. It would take a period of time and it would need to be phased, and we very deliberately phased that to look to prioritise the areas where we felt we needed to look first. In the third place, we had to do some other place in command, which with most of the uniformed officers and the public will see the name of the policing teams. And we did thoroughly review that, and we chose to largely remain with a geographically based model based on our 10 district council areas, which puts local officer in charge of policing their local areas and enables maybe a policing approach to engage really effectively with that. There are other models that we could have adopted. Some of those may deliver up some small efficiencies over the model that we've got, but we very strongly felt, evidenced by the data, that would be at the expense of effectiveness and local engagement. And frankly, I thought I still thinking we have discussed this, that it is worth that additional investment because of the ability to deliver local problem solving, which first we've talked about by having that very local influence. In doing that, it was very apparent we had other bits of the organisation that still needed to move on to. Specifically, our safeguarding and crime command, and we're in the process of working through and reviewing that at present. As we set out with the regional strategy, the HMRC report effectively came in and said, yes, that's where you are, and made some observations that we still haven't reviewed that part of the business, but we made it quite clear to them that we're in the process of doing that. It's still part of the review that's which is probably why I'm frustrated. So, there may be, as we do that, I'm sure that has already identified changes we want to put in place with foreign scope and some others within there, and that work one will certainly be complete by the time it doesn't extend.
Okay, thank you. And that's probably a classic case of inspections. Midway a piece of work and so you haven't finished it. So that's fine. Like I said, I agree with when you started there around the importance of that, maybe some more based on that district. That's absolutely where the public wants policing to be in terms of very local focus, well resourced, effective neighbourhood policing. So I'm certainly not sitting here telling you that. That's really useful. Thank you. So we covered a lot of ground there, really, and I suppose just in terms of the next steps, it's going back to the sort of peer review and re-inspection around the CDI crime reporting aspects of it, and just refresh me, Deputy Constable, around the timescales that you're anticipating for that in terms of the next outputs from this area of work.
So we're expecting West Yorkshire Police to come in and do an independent sense check for us through December. And then I've had discussions with the Inspectorate around the timing of when we'll come back in to check progress. And that's still open for discussion. We expect early next year, but they are open to discussion when need be. What they don't want to do is come straight back in without giving us time to respond. So that's a discussion that we've been ongoing. But the work continues at pace. We'll see what they're short on and they put into that work for us. And then we'll listen to that feedback and make sure we get this right.
Great, thank you very much. Looking forward to seeing you with that. And that brings to the close then of this morning's meeting. And thank you very much for the conversation.